Hello there. I'm Kimberly HayDay.
And I'm Amanda Day.
And guess what? You're listening to Fundraising HayDay,
where we cover the how-tos of grants and fundraising.
How we can all, and I mean all, do a better job of changing the world through philanthropy.
And a special shout out to our Patreon subscribers who make this podcast possible. To join this amazing community with monthly playlists, a fabulous book club where we meet live once a quarter now, and a wide open Mistakes Were Made and monthly musings by Kimberly. Just visit our Patreon website, which is patreon.com/fundraising HayDay.
So Amanda and I really love training live. We like it live online. We like it live in person. And we are booking into mid-2026 and 2027. Right now, we'd love to see you wherever you may be, if it is possible for us to be there, or online, also an option. We bring what I think is some fun chemistry and definite ways to engage people, and also 55 plus, because I stopped counting at 25, 55 plus combined years of grant writing, grant management, training experience with nonprofits and local governments who really do cover the waterfront. Also, games and cheesy sound effects are included. No extra charge for that. So let's talk about how that can help you win more grants and help the communities you serve through some quality, fun, and informative training.
Absolutely. Just email us at hello@haydayservices.com. Remember, HayDay is HayDay because it's our last name. So hello@haydayservices.com. And we're happy to schedule a call and just see what training possibilities look like for your organization.
So today, in episode 1 of season 9, we are kicking off a 2-part series of what went wrong in 2025. So we're focusing on how we got there. And if you're old enough to remember that Talking Heads song about that, just drop me a line at hello@haydayservices and pull a quote from that favorite song. I'm going to be here for you. Letting the days go by. I'm just saying. So we want to sort of get back to some root causes and help folks get a grip on what's going on. And then next episode, Amanda is going to take us by the hand and gently lead us into some specific impacts in the grants world, and then what we can do moving forward. Because we don't like to just bitch about stuff, although actually it delights me to no end. But nothing will change unless we identify things, get our feelings out, and then figure out our next steps.
Yep, we'll jump into all of that right after a quick word from our very new sponsor for 2026. Y'all, we are so very excited to introduce our listeners to the first season 9 sponsor of the Fundraising HayDay podcast. Grant Guru is the world's largest aggregator of grants and funding, and this incredible prospect research tool has made its way all the way from Australia to the United States. It's a searchable database that is updated daily, and it is so user-friendly. We're joined today by Adrian Spencer, co-founder and director of Grant Guru, to learn more about this incredible product with a mini-series during the first 12 episodes of this season.
Adrian, welcome to Fundraising HayDay. We are thrilled to help introduce you and your product to our listeners. Can we just get started with why you got started with your product in Australia and what's up with that?
Thanks, Kimberly. It's so great to be with you and Amanda. I started as a grant writer 25 years ago, and since then I've helped our clients secure over $1 billion. In the early days, though, there was no comprehensive, up-to-date list of grants. All the programs were listed on over 1,000 websites. So Heather, my wife, and I decided to build the comprehensive list. And initially it was built just for us, but once our competitors found out about it, they asked if they could license it from us. So in 2006, we spun it out into a separate company called Grant Guru. And we were the first to go online, maybe too early back then because people just wanted to buy a book in the early days. But it grew and grew from there. Now, as we know, there are more grants than ever, more need for the resource. Today, we have over 100,000 users. We have 40 people in our team. And Grant Guru is a comprehensive, up-to-date, easy to use. It's the largest aggregator of grants and funding in the world. And best of all, it's built by professionals for grant professionals.
I love that.
Nice. Find out more about this fantastic new resource for grant seekers. Visit grantguru.com/US. You get access to a user-friendly search engine, email alerts, grants calendar, customizable grant reports, and so much more.
And as an added bonus, Grant Guru is providing our listeners with 20% off their subscription. So when you go to make your purchase, use the discount code HayDay963. That's HayDay 963. So 2025.
Yeah.
A year I'm happy is behind us. And you may wonder why we're wanting to talk more about a year that probably most of us would rather forget because it was a challenging year. It was a rough year. It was a frustrating year, to say the least. But still, we're going to talk about it.
We don't talk about it because your girl with the silver hair is so tired of people saying, I'm surprised and stunned and shocked. I'm like, I don't even know why. Because if there's a way that we can help listeners come to terms with that, and more importantly, get down to some sources and figure out, oh, this is a part of a plan. This isn't arbitrary madness, although a lot of it felt that way. No. There's a plan. There's a literal plan that we're going to be talking about today. The root causes driving what happened in 2025 and will drive that car all through this current presidential administration. And then maybe after whatever happens next, okay?
Yeah.
A lot of these changes were outlined in Project 2025. This is a document. It's like 920 pages. Have I read all 920 pages? No. Just like I don't have uniform guidance memorized, but I know where to look. Think of this as the uniform guidance for what is happening to the millions of people, children, older people, families who are being affected. Of course, if you're a federal grant writer, you're like, oh my Lord, I'm being affected too. Yes, but it's not, at this point, it should not be a surprise. So we're here to kind of break it down to not all the way back, because this has been like a 50-year process, right? By different leadership elements and the right to move this forward. And you know what? It's been well planned, straight up. And a planning document, because we're all about documents, right? Because we love us some research and documents, is Project 2025. That was actually released by the Heritage Foundation back in April 2023. And as Amanda will point out later, we have some show notes where I'm going to be talking about some things. Amanda will be talking about some things. And we got show notes, right, Amanda? We got show notes with links and all the good things, because you know what? Do your own research.
Yeah.
Do your own research. But let me just at least get the lay of the land for you, and then you can decide what you want to do from there.
Yep. There certainly was a lot of denial during 2024 during the president's campaign about whether Project 2025 would be implemented, but we saw key elements of that put into action almost immediately after the inauguration. And as Kimberly said, we've got the receipts, as the kids would say. So check our show notes if you want to see where we're referencing all this information from.
I think I'm just going to start at the top right now, right? Because this is what you should know. If you don't already, the person who was officially appointed, and there were some things going on in the election and up to his appointment that were also handled and also very specific and also, wow, a lot. But the role at the OMB, right? Office of Managing and Management and Budget, sorry. Specifically, the newish director, by the time you're hearing this, Russell Vogt. He's leading it, and we're getting ready to break it down in this our conversation as to why that's a big deal as how it relates to Project 2025, which is very explicit and direct about what it wants to do to the federal government, particularly of particular importance, what it wants to do to grant making agencies. So Amanda, take it away.
Yeah. So first of all, we need to understand why OMB matters so much. And I will tell you, my first couple of years of grant writing and management, I was flying so blind. Like, I don't think I even knew what OMB was. I just knew there's rules and regs to follow and we better follow them. But I had no idea there was this overarching agency. It wasn't until I started talking to other grant professionals, finally getting some grant management training under my belt, that I started understanding how very organized and strict things were when it comes to federal grants. And I'm not mad at that, right? OMB exists for a reason, and that's okay. But they really do. The OMB office sits at the center of everything related to federal spending, which means they have a lot of power. And, we want people to be doing good things with power. But OMB prepares the president's budget recommendations to Congress, and they oversee how executive agencies implement the president's priorities. So it's more than just, hey, here's our guide and rule book. They do a lot of things.
Actually cover that whole spectrum.
Yeah.
So they help decide what gets requested, and then they monitor how it gets spent. Should not be doing this thing that's doing the other thing. Hi, hello. Here's one agency that's doing all of it, and no one ever really talks about that agency. So yeah, it's enormous power. It's enormous power.
And the new director, Voigt, he actually wrote the chapter on presidential authority in Project 2025, which made his vision crystal clear. He wrote that the OMB director must view his job as the best, most comprehensive approximation of the president's mind.
But there's more. He also, I'm going to quote this. I'm going to read from this. He also called the OMB a president's air traffic control system. Although, actually, Russell, was that the best analogy considering the state of air travel today? I don't know, but I'm a little bitter and angry, so I'm going to be sarcastic, but I'm going to keep going. He said President's air traffic control system, and said it should be, quote, involved in all aspects of the White House policy process. So powerful enough to, these are my words, powerful enough to override implementing agencies' bureaucracies.
Yeah.
So that's a heaping helping of power.
Yeah, not subtle at all, is it? He basically is saying that OMB should control everything happening across all federal agencies, which you're like, well, yeah, Amanda, it did. It laid some groundwork for what had to happen, but essentially it was still up to each agency to tweak. Like, they could always make things more strict. They could make things unique to their agency, right? Because if you've ever managed grants across multiple organizations, multiple funders, whether it's Department of Health and Human Services, Education, FEMA, whoever, there are different nuances from agency to agency because they all have different purposes and roles and those kinds of things. But he's saying, nope, OMB really should just be in control of everything, and there shouldn't be these nuances. And in January 2025, even before he was officially confirmed by the Senate, we started seeing his influence immediately.
That's because before he was confirmed, a dude named Matthew Vaith was the acting director, right? And he issued this memo. Again, we're going back to how do we get here so that there can be no more. But I don't understand. If you listen to our podcast today, God love you. If you're a new listener, hi, I'm angry. And if you're a returning listener, hi, yeah, I'm angry again.
That.
I mean, you know that. But here's the language that he used in a memo that came out in January 2025, right? So a year ago, talking about freezing all federal loans and grants, because wasn't that fun? Here's the language, a quote. He was calling out what he termed Marxist equity, transgenderism, and green New Deal social engineering policies as what was driving the grants freeze. And you may be asking yourself, where were my beautiful federal grants? And you may be asking yourself, how did we get here? And again, if you know what song I'm talking about, hello at HayDay Services. Would love to talk more. But and you may not consider your agency or your clients Marxist, and I would probably agree with you, but this is what we're dealing with here. Nobody's trying to hide anything. Nobody's trying to hide anything. So the idea of putting your head down and just continuing to write the grants, even though it's crazy when they come out and everything, not only do you need to understand what it is you're dealing with, you need to prepare your clients or your employers to take steps and understand that this isn't just one man with a lot of spray tan making some arbitrary rules. This is a concentrated, planned effort. And we just want to walk you through how the planning is for this first episode of our new season.
Yeah. Well, and that freeze went even beyond what Project 2025 suggested. The document had called for pausing, reviewing, and eliminating grants that advance what they saw as liberal agendas, but a complete government-wide halt was certainly much more extreme. But that's what happened. Things just
And eventually, a lot of it was overturned, right? Yes. But the damage was done and the damage continues. This whole freeze thing kind of connects to a legal theory that has been bandied about but never really used called impoundment, that argues that when Congress appropriates money, they're just setting a spending ceiling and not a floor. And you're like, why are you throwing out all these architectural terms? It's like the idea of impoundment being that the president under this ideology could say, yeah, we can spend less than that and it's okay. We're just never going to spend more, but we could spend less. So it kind of takes the idea of appropriations and turns it on its head, and again, concentrates power in the executive branch.
Yeah, which is frustrating because our four founders set up our government with three separate, distinct branches and very separate and distinct responsibilities and roles to make sure that no one of those three kind of took over everything. So Congress has the power of the purse, right? They're the ones that get to set, these are the programs and this is how much money. And certainly the president has a role in helping with the budget and determining some of these things, but ultimately it's their decision. But this impoundment thing basically is saying, yep, the president can simply decide not to spend money on anything he deems unnecessary, no matter what Congress has decided. So it's literally taking away one of the powers of Congress. So it's kind of like, it doesn't matter, you allotted $10 million. I don't like that program. We're not spending a dime of it.
Yeah. Also, quick shout out to, we realize that the founding fathers were not bastions of integrity and equality. There were several who were slave owners and women didn't have the vote. I'm just saying they were trying to set up a checks and balances thing back then.
Yes.
That seems to have been the intent. So moving away from revisionist history. Now let's talk about which agencies and programs were hit hardest and are still being hammered. And we can start off maybe with education, right?
Yep. So Project 2025 specifically called for phasing out or the elimination of major K through 12 programs like Title I Part A, which provides funds to low-income school districts, and IDEA funding for students with disabilities.
So also Head Start, you probably read about this in the headlines. And if you're saying, oh, but I work for arts and culture organization, what does this have to do with me? Or I work for environmental, stick around. We'll get down to that. But in the Department of Education, which as we are recording this now in December 2025, is actively being in the process of being dismantled and is headed by the wife of a wrestling magnate whose sole purpose in coming was to dismantle. I mean, again, nobody's saying anything differently. Like a lot of this funding that we'll talk about, these specific grants and specific programs, some of the language around this in Project 2025 and in the current administration is centered around block grants that would then go to the states, but only the states that were maybe approved as not practicing Marxist equity, for example. So we're setting a stage here, not just for Head Start, for example, but these block grants and redirecting funding has a lot of different implications that I know you're going to talk about.
Yeah. Well, it just means that states and parents could potentially use this money to help fund private schools or homeschooling or things like that instead of it going directly to public education. And it certainly is a fundamental shift in how federal education dollars flow. And I mean, I could probably do a whole episode on my frustration of that. I know in my community, we have an incredible public school system. It's part of why we live here. But there are still people that don't want more money going into the public schools either because they've got a kid that they want to send to a private school, or maybe they have no children. And my argument always is no community can be successful without a successful public education, right, system, because that's a lot of us came up through that, and you're never going to have good, nice homes, good infrastructure with, a good hospital. You're never going to have all those things if you don't have a good school system. And so if you've already got a school system that's not doing well and you're going to take money away even more, what's that, and again, these are the people that are going to be taking care of us when we're older. Don't we want public schools now to be educating? Like, I could just go off about that because it's beyond frustrating that the answer is they're not doing well. Well, let's just take the money away and put it somewhere else. And I'm not one for let's not keep doing the same thing over and over and over again if it's not working. I don't think that every grant program and every grant process we use is perfect and fabulous, but just being like, we don't like your ways, we're taking all your money away. That's not going to end.
Perpetual ignorance is a great tool of control.
Yeah.
Also, the plan, and again, I'm the current administration plans, which are based on Project 2025, which is freely available online. We, again, have links to it in our show notes. So yeah, I'm not making this up. I'm just taking a little ready read and letting you know. This plan also recommended eliminating competitive grant programs across the board. So if you're saying, well, what does that have to do with me? Hi, Brenda. If you write grants for the Department of Education and that's how you feed your family, you're going to need to rethink that strategy. Or if you're working in a nonprofit that relies on Department of Education funding for your after school programs, because that happens to be one of my clients, it's like, let's know that this is the end goal and prepare and not just cower and keep our head down and hope it doesn't happen. Let's be real and know and think about what we can do.
Yep. Well, speaking of research, the National Institutes of Health face proposals to convert their grants budget into block grants that are provided to states. And that's a massive change considering grants make up a huge portion of NIH's budget.
Also, just a quick, you're like, hey, I don't write for a health and human services organization. Are you experiencing good or ill health? Then I don't even know. I don't even know how to break it down anymore, people. It's like, it's happening everywhere. And if you think it doesn't affect you, it's because you just haven't been thinking hard enough. Similarly, there were similar shifts proposed for environmental programs, right? The EPA may, by this point, have a political appointee in charge of determining grant distribution. I know there are major changes in how the overall, not just EPA, but overall in how grants are being reviewed. And let me say, as someone who's had grants reviewed and who has been a federal grants reviewer, the process, she was not the most efficient. But there did seem to be, however onerous and however many trainings you had to go through that were mind-numbing and panel discussions, there was a system for creating things and making decisions that did not seem to be as politically polarizing. And I think that's changing, right?
It involves subject matter experts. It wasn't a willy-nilly like, hey, you person on the street, review this grant. Like, you had to know a thing or two about the subject matter. So you're making best recommendations for what should be the most success with that grant.
Fair.
Infrastructure wasn't spared either. The Capital Investment Grants Program, which awards federal grants to communities for infrastructure projects, was targeted for elimination. And this program has been especially important since the bipartisan infrastructure law passed in 2021, which all of that has been pretty much tossed to the wayside at this point. Anything related to that program that Biden built.
Remember, we spent a lot of time helping people understand Justice 40 and its implications. And then we were so excited when they started using current data. Yeah, bye. Gone. Also, the Economic Development Administration grants, which a lot of IEDC, IEDC is the association, but a lot of regional commissions and government councils and other groups kind of depended on, right, to build economic advantages in their communities. Those are pretty much gone. Yeah. Or they're very selective, or they may be rolled up into block grants. So there's a lot of talk and not a lot of information, but the general trend seems to be toward consolidating and moving away from individual grants and more toward who's the most favored state, and they're the ones that get the funding.
Yeah. And even disaster relief has been impacted. Project 2025 really encourages withholding FEMA funds from state or local governments that didn't comply with federal immigration laws. Of course, there's also been talk about getting rid of FEMA and moving all of that programming to states, which do not have the bandwidth, the staff, the infrastructure. I'm not saying they never could do it, but to just suddenly stop FEMA and dump it on the hands of states, and I just can't even imagine.
Full acknowledgement that FEMA has not been the best run, tightest ship on the planet. But I also want to respectfully point out that, let's say, actually, the state government of Georgia, pretty much in the surplus, right? But if there's a huge disaster in the state that's supposed to manage the huge disaster, can anyone listening see how that could be not a great thing? Because if there's a huge storm that sweeps in off the Atlantic and decimates most of Georgia and moves into other states such as North Carolina, kind of like it did in 2024, those states that are impacted are not the ones that are in the best position to get out immediately in emergencies. Why? Because they're actually experiencing the emergency. So, yeah, what could go wrong, right?
Nothing. So let's talk about just eliminating grant programs entirely is what's happening as well. So it's not just tweaking of things and doing it differently, but the philosophy overall seems to drastically reduce the federal government's role and shift authority to states or private sectors. It's kind of seems to be the overall theme of things.
Right. So then it brings us to what actually happened on the ground in 2025, right? And you may be like, why are y'all repeating all this? So that we can learn and so that we can move forward together and figure out what needs to be done. And again, because I'm really tired of going to conferences and being on webinars and have people go, but I don't understand why this is happening. Melissa, because it is happening. Okay? Because it is. And here's some reasons why. And knowledge is power. So we had the initial freeze in January of all federal loans and federal grants, and that was immediate chaos, right? We had organizations waiting on funding. We had folks that couldn't get reimbursed. We had grant consultants going, holy crow, I am not writing this grant. I am. Yeah. So, yeah.
Then the freeze was technically lifted, mostly because organizations sued the federal government and was determined that this was not going to work because it wasn't legal. But grant processing delays continued. Some agencies required additional steps. Documents and processes that hadn't existed before were suddenly put into place. Extra hoops were having to be jumped through. And it was a lot. I've heard of a lot of horror stories of people going, we spent this money that was on our approved budget, and now we can't get it refunded because they're saying we didn't do X, Y, and Z, and they're trying to close out our grant on us, and we still have 3 months left, and help.
And I know this is something, Amanda, you're leading the charge next in our next episode about this, but huge implications for grant writers on the ground, right? Things were turnarounds that used to be 30 days on when everybody was playing fair, could be 5 days. I've rumored, I never saw this application, there was a DOT grant that was a 24-hour turnaround once it was finally released. I mean, it was just madness.
Yep. Then in August, there was an executive order that basically shredded grant work entirely and how we've all been operating forever. But it put senior political appointees in charge of reviewing funding opportunities, just adding another layer of political oversight to all of grant making.
It was also the executive order that said, yeah, grant writing is basically a
That was
scam
the
and it's
same
not,
one. Yeah,
yeah,
it was.
good times.
Mhm.
Now, should grants be more streamlined? Yes. Should there be a fair gathering of information to explain why your local government or nonprofit or university or hospital can handle several $1 million in grants over a few years? Also, yes. But this wasn't really about that, right? So then, we were just feeling so good rolling through the fall. Then the government shut down. The longest I think ever was 41 days. The number two in government shutdowns was also in the Trump administration, but it was the first one. I think that was a little over 30 days. So setting records that shouldn't really be bragging points, I think.
Yeah.
So there was no one to reach out to in that time about applications, although I personally continued working on applications that were submitted by a team through grants.gov and Department of Justice, Just Grants during that time. So it's kind of like, hope they got it, hope they were getting responses, but the deadlines that at least I was working on did not change. I mean, I don't think you were working on any federal grants at this time, so I don't know if you have anything.
No, well, there were some I was keeping an eye on for clients, and there were several that were forecasted. And so when the government shutdown ended, they did go live without any of the forecasted dates changed. So it was like where you would have had 45 days, now you were down to maybe 30, or less because they didn't change.
Wow.
It kind of felt like, well, we forecasted and we put everything out there, so you should have been working on it. And thankfully, my part-time work with Boyd Grants, they were like, we just acted like this is the deadline. As long as they've
Yeah.
got the RFP, we're going to keep moving forward like it is.
Yeah.
But normally when it's forecasted until it goes live, a lot of times you don't touch them because you've got a million other things to do. So it was just a hot mess. And then to add insult to injury, in addition to all of that craziness, when the Department of Government Efficiency, also known as DOGE, got their hands on things, they terminated nearly 12,000 grants that were in process, right? So that's a staggering number to have happened. I can't imagine with these agencies who were told, yes, you're getting this funding, or maybe they were in the middle of things and it was like, nope, you're done.
Also, all the people, the communities, the
Yes.
bridges, the schools, everything that was just normally like, yeah, federal government should be um, paying for these things. Not only that, but we submitted grants and were approved to have this payment. But then again, at the time, if you remember in the news, there were several leaders in the Doge movement who maybe were not college graduates and may have possibly been dude bros from Silicon Valley with such monikers online as big balls. So I just want to put that out there. We were not talking cream of the crop when it came to making that. So basically, what we're looking at here is like an intersection of ideology. I refer you to the Marxist views that are apparently permeating our federal agencies, according to executive orders and the current head of OMB. Okay, and taken from a document that I have referenced in the show notes because I am that petty person. Language not attributed to Voight, who wrote the chapter on leadership in Project 2025, but others, there was a whole section, there was like a subsection on leadership that talked about using money as a tool to bring administrative agencies to heal. And you may be like, are we talking about the dog whisperer, or are we talking about federal government strategy? I'd be like, you decide. It sounds like some sort of weird sadistic training manual for wayward dogs and not a way to run the biggest economy in the world. But here we are. And these results have been devastating. Again, Yes, for grant writers. Yes, for nonprofits and local governments. Yes, for universities and hospitals and all the, but for the people who were supposed to rightfully receive these benefits to which they are entitled. To me, that it's bad enough what happened in our field, but it has the implications on the ground for children and for older people in particular are horrific.
Yeah, which is one of the things we're going to focus on in our next episode, because this is a two-parter. So we're going to talk about the impacts to organizations and communities, plus what we can do as grant professionals moving forward. And I'm going to go ahead and give you a tip. We don't have all the answers. There is no magic bullet to save all of this stuff, but we do have some tips and tricks. But for now, it's important to understand what did happen, how we got here, that it wasn't random, it was planned, and it was executed very systematically. And it's not over yet either. Like, I don't feel like, oh, great, it's 2026. All of that's behind us.
Again, and have I sat down and read cover to cover 920 pages of Project 2025? No, I've gone into specific sections. I would direct you to agriculture, because if you're like, none of this applies to me, I'm good. This government is doing great things. Do you eat food? If you do, you might want to go to Project 2025 and look at the plans for our agricultural system. And that's really all I'm going to say about that, because you'd almost say something about something else. But really, the question is, well, what will 2026 look like? And I would, again, will these changes stick? There are many of them that are being litigated right now. There are also many justices that are being fired in many different sections of our government now. So even if everything is lifted, there's still going to be a quagmire of paperwork and legal proceedings and all kinds of things that I think there will continue to be interruptions. And I've talked about this before. Some people are like, well, will there be pushback and will someone do something? I just want to go, you know what? We are maybe the someones. I will continue to say that. Let's don't wait for someone. Let's figure out, start at a local level. What can I do within my agency? How can I educate and move forward? And I know we're going to have some more ideas in our next episode. And I think but just remember, you may be that someone. In fact, you probably are.
Yeah. Well, because the one thing we can do is control how we respond to all of this, how we prepare, how we continue serving the communities that we do, despite all of these massive shifts. And so that's what we're going to focus on next time. So thanks for coming to the This Is What Happened, Oh My Gosh episode. And we hope you'll be back for some answers, hopefully.
Thanks again to today's sponsor, Grant Guru. If you want to learn more about this incredible new tool to the grant prospect research market, visit grantguru.com/US. You'll find the link in our show notes.
And remember, they are providing a 20% off discount code on your subscription. So when you go to make your purchase, enter the code HayDay963. That's HayDay 963.
So yeah, this was a heavy topic, but a worthy one, and I stand behind it. Please go to our show notes, check the resources, read and inform yourself. Knowledge is power. This is nothing that is secretive. There's nothing secretive about what's happening. Understanding how we got here is the first step, and figuring out how to move forward, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We are so honored you chose to return with us for season 9 of the podcast. We hope you'll join us again in 2 weeks and for every 2 weeks throughout 2026. So our next episode, we're talking about the real world impacts and steps you can take. We'll see you then.
See ya.